Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Human Factors Cast. This is episode 305. We're recording this live on November 14th, 2024. Nothing big happened in the last couple weeks here. I'm your host, Nick Rome, joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby.
Hello, and I promise I'm going to try and stay for the entire episode this time.
Okay, yes, and we're going to stay focused on the
We are.
topics tonight. We do have an awesome show for you lined up. We have some cool stuff to talk about, including humanoid robots in the news again. We have some making waves here, and we're going to talk about Axiom's new spacesuit that's been causing quite a ruckus on the interwebs. We also have a couple of other stories that we might sprinkle in and out of there as it seems fit, but first, say some programming notes or community updates. We've been taking the last couple weeks off, as you can imagine. From my perspective here in the States, I didn't think it was appropriate that I sat here on the show last week and tried to pretend like nothing happened. From my perspective, as a fairly left-leaning dude, so we're back, and just we kind of talked a little bit about this during the pre-show, but I'll kind of step on my soapbox here. It's not the result that I'm wanted. And I think many of us are feeling the same way. And just a quick reminder that to kind of focus your efforts on what you can control. Us here in Human Factors, I kind of said during the pre-show that Human Factors is not neutral. This is something that we work on in our day-to-day, and it's focused on the humans at the end of this thing. Focus on what you can control, and if we make somebody's lives better through our work as Human Factors engineers, Human Factors professionals, then we're making the world a better place. So let's push on, keep forward. But I'm not the only one here. We have an international perspective with us, Barry. I am curious as to what's going on over at 1202. Did you have a regularly scheduled episode last week?
We did have a regularly scheduled episode, and it was not distracted by the events of what was going on. So I interviewed Rosie Kane, and she's the cluster manager for an organization called Space Wales. And really, they exist to bring those organizations and companies within Wales that have an interest in the space industry together to be able to work together and deliver the requirements from the Welsh government, so the Welsh space strategy. And it was really fascinating because I kind of I'll be honest, I kind of dropped her in it a little bit, because one of my criticisms is that here in the UK that there isn't that much going on in terms of ergonomics and human factors within our space sector, largely because it's still quite relatively immature, and basically a lot of people don't think that human factors need to be involved because it's satellites and stuff. And so I kind of one of the questions I dropped in was, what do you think the role is of ergonomics and human factors within Space Wales? And she came out with some fantastic answers. And so I suggest you go over and have a listen to see yourself, to see whether she held up her side of the answer, which I think she did brilliantly. And but also you listen to her career story, and she's so dedicated. She was influenced really, really early on. I think she's one of the few people I've met who've had that goal and actually went and just kept following it, delivering it through to what she's doing now. So yeah, thoroughly well worth a listen, I believe. But then I'd say that because it's my stuff.
I have to say my level of excitement over the course of you describing that went all over the place because when you said Space Whales, I was like, oh, Purgill, Star Wars. If you know, you know. And then you're like, oh, but we talked to somebody, Wales, space industry. Okay. But then as you were talking about it, it got me interested again. So I'm going to have to check that out. If you know about Purgills, you know. All right. So we should get into the news, I think. Why don't we do it?
Let's do that.
That's right. It's time about that time again where we dust off the shelves, pull out what's going on in the world of human factors. Barry, we have a couple stories up this week. What's going on?
So yeah, the first one we're going to talk about is one of my favorite companies that I like to watch what they're doing, which is Boston Dynamics. This time, they have teamed up with Toyota Research Institute and to create what they're calling the ultimate humanoid robot. So everyone's seen Boston Dynamic robots do their thing. You see them do a lot of failure and the way that they learn, and then when they go and succeed, and the way that they succeed, you often find out about because a lot of people are trying to call them videos out for being fake, but they then release the videos of how they got there, and so that's brilliant. But they're bringing that and teaming it with Toyota Research Institute, or TRI. They're large behavior models, or LBMs. So, what's an LBM? I'd never heard of it before reading this story. It's a it's similar in approach to a large language model, ChatGPT, etc., but for robot behavior. And so the idea is that you have all of that learning. It speeds up the learning process for robots. When you're looking at the skills of dexterity, and really what they're suggesting is that this will change the way that robots are taught and how, and basically make them useful way quicker and therefore commercially viable. So, Nick, do you think this is good news that we can have humanoid robots quicker, and to your house really quickly? Do you want a humanoid robot in your life doing the stuff that you need done?
Yeah. I frequently joke with my wife that I we're gonna have a robot in our kitchen doing dishes every night, whether she wants that or not, because it just makes life easier. But I mean, it is an interesting story, and I think we can actually expand this beyond the Boston Dynamics and Toyota story to include perhaps even another one that was in the news too, which was the Tesla event, which I think was I mean, U.S. politics aside, and who's in charge of that company, I think we try to stick away from that. But that event too also had sort of this unveiling of their robot as well, and it's interesting to see this sort of trend towards needing a humanoid robot occupying your own personal space.
Mhm.
Um, it there's a there's a lot of interesting things that we could pull apart from this in terms of what it means to have um a robot servant in your home, and whether or not, like, there's I'm gonna say this, but there's like, some kids today who are like, what are some things that you'll look back on and people will think that your ways are antiquated based on the ways that people think about other generations, and it's like, well, we not think that robots have rights or something like that. And so it's when you have a robot in the home, are you treating them as a thing, or as a person, or do robots have personhood? And I think we're beyond that question right now. But even my initial thought is that yes, I want something like this in my home. Uh, if only to make life a little bit easier. But Barry, I am curious on sort of your perspective on this. Are you anticipating a new addition to your household when these become widely available, or are you a never robot in the home person?
I don't see. My gut reaction would have been, yeah, buy me three. I just, let's have one in the kitchen, one in the living room, sorting out, bringing any snacks and things like that. But then there is an element there of I do wonder, why do they have to be humanoid? Why are we so set out to have humanoid robots as opposed to maybe robots that are more functional? So all the robots that we have now in factories and things like that are built around the function that they deliver. The Boston Dynamics robots seem to be focusing on delivering human-like and dog-like capability. If you've seen the dog version of their robot, um, and seeing one of them in, I was going to say in the flesh, but in the metal, was a really interesting experience a couple of months ago. Um, why do we need them to be humanoid? Is that simply a research challenge or a manufacturing challenge to sort of show that we can do, that we can develop this type of robot, and in this case, then actually get it to learn really quickly, or is it just showing off?
I'll tell you exactly why. You want
Go
to
on
know
then.
why?
I do
It's
know. I
be-
do know why. Go
it's
ask the question.
it's part marketing
Yeah.
and part use case. So
Mhm.
you have specialized robots in the home already. You have Roombas that are vacuuming your floors. You have dishwashers that are automated systems that wash your dishes that don't necessarily take the thing in and out. They perform a function, but you have automated things within your house. And the marketing piece of this is, oh, you can give it a personality. You can give it these humanoid like characteristics, but then also the imagination piece is that anything that you can do as a human, you can imagine this thing doing. So
Yeah.
whether you're training it to unload the dishes from the dishwasher and put them back away, or vacuum your floor with an actual vacuum cleaner instead of a robot vacuum. You can imagine that any one of these things can be adapted towards a humanoid form because they were built for humanoids to begin with. And so I think that is much easier to market from that perspective of like, hey, if I can do this, I can train this thing to do it, and then I won't need to do it. I can get this thing to clean up trash off the floor. I can, I can get it to clean the cat litter box every week or something because it's just a simple process of doing the thing. I can have it unload the groceries from the car and bring them in. So you think about those types of things, it's much easier to make that close that gap from what a human can do to what this robot can do. What can't it do? Well,
Hmm.
anything that a human can't is probably at the limits of what that thing can do. And there's probably limits that it can't do that a human can, but it's much easier to imagine what you can do with that. So that's the reason why.
No, I think it's right. I think it's interesting to see how basically there does seem to be this bit of a race on now, doesn't there? You mentioned the Tesla robot, um, and I think that was quite interesting because obviously there was the now I don't know whether it was proven because I never saw the end of the story, but there was the allegation made, I believe, that the Tesla robot was there and it was having a conversation with somebody, but actually, the voice of the Tesla robot was not the robot's voice. It was voiced in from somewhat a third party who was watching or listening to it. And is that just them trying to then do what you just said, sort of get that one step ahead, which is interesting. And the this battle, if it's a battle between Tesla and Boston Dynamics, going forward will only benefit science in the same way that Apple and IBM went head to head, and it was because of the stuff that sorry, Apple and Microsoft were doing. The Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were so using each other to push hard on what they were doing that if they didn't have the competition, they wouldn't have developed in the way. Maybe that's what we're seeing here. um, I had a bit of a random thought with this as well. What size do you make the robots? Do we make them all? So, if you're making a humanoid robot, do you make them all the same size? So,
Mm,
every robot. I mean, if we know by what we do anthropometrically, humans come in all shapes and sizes, and that is part of the fun of what we do. So, do we make robots in the humanoid robots all the same, or do we make them all different? Um, yeah, what would you do?
uh, yeah, and then the follow-on question to that, if if robots eventually will have rights, and their size impacts your perception of them, then are smaller robots like children?
Hmm. Or
So
is there a dominant submissive piece here where actually you create smaller robots because you feel like you can order them around, tell them what to do?
right,
And so if you get sized up wrong for your robot, do you size your robot to the human
to
to
the
make
human.
sure that there is a hierarchy in place? This has suddenly gone to a place I wasn't expecting.
My
Um,
well, so look, like there's some good question, there's some good merit to this question, and let's break it down because I think for me the immediate answer that I came up with was the anthropometric middle average. You get the anthropometric average of humans, and that would get at sort of that first point that I made around being able to use or do anything that humans are meant to do or use around the home or in the office space. You can imagine these being used for work or something along those lines. And so you might actually have a scenario where, like, my wife is short. My wife is 5 foot, and so, like, she has trouble reaching things up high. But if you have the anthropometric middle, she might want a larger robot to help her assist with her getting things up high. And vice versa. You might have like a smaller robot. You might not actually be able to fit inside a chimney to clean it, but you can send a robot in there that's tiny.
Mhm.
So there's absolutely use cases for every size, but I'd imagine the gut answer here of anthropometric middle would allow for more use cases, and more adaptability to the various tasks that somebody might want to use one of these for, given that most things designed for humans could be used by this thing then.
So this does then bring out, so there's a lot of work, a lot of research work going on at the moment around this idea of human machine teaming. And however you dress it up, there's a lot of stuff that is talking around trust, around how you cooperate with robots, no matter what the shape. But a lot of the stuff I've been looking at has been focusing on humanoid robots in this space. Um, and one of the interesting use cases somebody gave me. So we've been looking at this from like ships and all this sort of stuff. But then with a lot of people working from home, if you suddenly decided that, or somebody said, "I need you in the office tomorrow," and you're like, "Nah, I want to be sat at home," could you send your humanoid robot, who is your co-partner now? So you have a co-partner in the office, that is your humanoid robot. Could you send them to the meeting in your place, given that they probably have all the data that you have, or access to all of that data? It probably will, if by this point have been able to work out how you think and how you make decisions, therefore could probably make decisions or reference back to you as and when needed. Do you ever need to leave your home office ever again? You can just send your humanoid robot out to have meetings with other people's humanoid robots. Jobs are good.
That's fascinating because when I said workplace, I was imagining like these service roles, right? Like bringing a drink to a table, or grabbing papers from the printer around the office, or like going around as a waiter in the office to make sure that all your employees are sort of taken care of, or some of the like janitorial duties around an office, something that you could potentially um pay uh, an upfront cost for a robot like this to sort of cover that. But you're taking it to the next level where it's almost like a telepresence thing, where this robot would then act on your behalf, or be an avatar for you in the physical space, such that you could stay at home, have access to all of your data and everything, and then sort of in the physical environment still allow for that interaction. And that's fascinating, and that's not where my brain went. And to answer your question, I don't know. And that might be further out down the line. I can very much see the the sort of manual labor things being taken care of first. But that's interesting because you think about sort of this cognitive load that we're all carrying, and if we can offset some of that to this robot, this humanoid robot, um, I think that can absolutely have an impact on the human operator at some point, because you sort of start to think about things that are overhead tasking for you, that this robot could almost handle autonomously. Like,
Mhm.
oh, hey, I gotta go get myself some water. You could just send it to go get yourself some water, so that way you're hydrated. And when it notices your thing is empty, then you just send it off, or it just goes and gets you more, or it prepares you food, and so you don't have to think about that stuff, or even to the extent of like taking notes or note taking during a meeting, if it's permitted, to where you could almost say like, what did they say there, and then it could intuit based on what you were saying, that, oh, you're talking about so and so said this, and play back a recording immediately. And so that cognitive load then is reduced. And so I think all these things together, I don't know about the telepresence thing necessarily. I think that could be an aspect of it, but I think definitely we're going to start seeing, hopefully, I don't know, um sort of these we can focus our brain power on other cognitively demanding tasks, and some of these like um keeping up to date with everything is going to be ancillary, secondary, whatever you want to call it, to the point where we're not worried about that stuff.
Yeah, I think both is true, to be honest. I think, and it goes back to how are we going to best utilize robots in the future and almost any sort of machine, because it goes back to this: how do we create the best team that we have? So you can imagine, so one of the ideas, rather than telepresence, going one step forward to teleexistence, and that's the idea that you go into some sort of suit and inhabit this robot body. So you'd want a humanoid robot, but you could get all the feedback, so it could go into areas that you cannot. So it could be, too hot, too cold. It could be another world, where you do this sort of stuff. But equally, you can then have that robot acting on your behalf in these inhospitable areas, and that is real use cases that are being played with now. So there is a bit of that, but then you go back to, yes, how do we use these, and is it right, actually, going back to this
Ethical question.
ethical question, is it right that we just use them to clean up after us?
Mm.
Is once we get, I mean, that's what we use. I mean, you brought out the Roomba earlier. That's why we have automated grass cutting, automated vacuuming, etc., etc. Is it because it's all about making our lives easier? We're going to get to a point where we are conversing and talking to these things like people. We go back to whichever episode it was where we had our online girlfriends, with the chat bot, and you're talking to them almost like real people, to the point that you could suspend disbelief. At what point does that become wrong, or questionable at best? So I think we're probably a long way from that, but possibly not as far away as we think.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if we're as far away as we think because, like I said, I think there are some people like I think older generations, of course, they're robots, whatever. They're just mechanical parts. But if you start thinking about sort of what it means to be human, and if you're interacting with a large language model, and if eventually we do reach AGI, um, then I think there's artificial general intelligence. I think there's definitely an argument to be made about what does it mean to be human, or what does it mean to think, and those questions will will become much more problematic. But when you're talking to a large language model right now, hopefully we're not having those thoughts about it. Especially there's sort of an ancillary story that we'll bring in here about people hating stories that they think were written by AI, even if they were written by people. So we can talk a little bit about that in context with
Hmm.
using large language models. And in this context, it's behavioral models. And so if you see robots behaving like humans, are we still going to think the same way? I don't know. It's an aggregate. I do want to bring up this question from Heidi, though. Isn't one of most people enough? Do we really need doubles of us running around?
It's an interesting question, is it? Because would we want do we want this humanoid robot just to be a clone of ourselves? Um, I mean, my gut reaction would be no.
No.
It's got to be something that is complementary to you, that works with you. I mean, however, there's going to be other people who may want that whole idea of a robot clone of yourself to do whatever. And I guess there's good there's all sorts of people out there, aren't there? So yeah, I don't think we'll get to the point where you'll have doubles in that respect, but I think there will definitely be some, because the broad range of people we've got. I guess that also lends itself to the question: we talk about a humanoid robot, and we mentioned earlier about how would you size it? Would you treat it as average? Um, but actually, is there a thing there? Almost going back to what you said, actually, you could create a shorter robot, but with longer arms for doing certain tasks. Um, could you give it longer legs so it'd actually be more efficient in walking, etc., etc.? Or could it change its limbs on will, depending on being task dependent? Or um, you'd almost be a Swiss Army knife of
Hmm.
humanoid robots to be task specific, or is that the point about having a humanoid one? Is the fact that we don't do that sort of thing, and the humanoid form is good enough to do most tasks.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think there's certainly some augments, right? How we think about a cell phone as an augmentation of our own cognitive abilities. We can offload some of that stuff to our phones as sort of uh, an extension of ourselves. I think the robot might actually work the same way. And then literally in the literal sense of extending arms and limbs to complete tasks that may be made easier by having those options to lengthen or shorten the limbs to do it, right? So like I mentioned the example earlier of putting things away or retrieving things from somewhere higher up. You can imagine, like, the legs and arms extend to go up to get that thing, so they don't need to fetch a ladder. They just have it built in. They just reach up, grab the thing, pull it down, and then they're back to normal. That would be cool. I can very much see use and utility for those types of things, because I think you're right. The more ubiquitous we make them, the more they can actually do things that humans can't, and increase the utility there. I mentioned an ancillary story, and I think there's actually another one that actually makes more sense to talk about right now, since we're talking a little bit about ethics and everything. But there's a story here by Imperial College London, who did a study on humans and how they displayed sympathy towards they protected AI bots who were excluded from playtime. So we're really looking at bullying here of AI, and how there's at least these emerging human behavior traits that are happening when it comes to looking at AI and starting to protect AI and even the way that we interact with it, that I think is really fascinating here from an ethical perspective. We're starting to see it already. People don't like that ostracism, and it's extended even towards AI, where when we sort of treat AI as outcasts, then we feel like we have to speak up and include them. And so will that then transfer to these home robots that we're talking about here? And I think maybe, I don't know. I'm thinking early on we'll have very much a situation where you have maybe one of these per household.
Mhm.
So to get at Heidi's double question, I don't see there being one per every human, but more like one per household. Really affluent folks might have multiple around the house doing multiple tasks, but I think, for most people, one should be enough. Most families, one should be enough. Uh, and will they be seen as part of the family? I don't know. These are all questions that are.
And then, and almost like looking at this that story around being bullied, or AI bot being bullied. Will If you've done a task yourself, um, that has a certain amount of value. So you go and wash the dishes, say. So you turn around to your partner and say, "It's okay. You sit down. I'm going to go and wash the dishes." Does that have a different flex rather than you saying, "Go and sit down. You don't need to do them. The robot's going to do them." So does the value of the task go down because you're getting the humanoid robot to do it rather than you do something? So you bake a cake or create something nice. You create a nice meal. Um, that has a lot of love, affection that goes into you creating that meal, which is very different from you saying, "It's okay. I got the robot chef to create you a Michelin star level meal because it can do that because it's just following the instructions." Um, so will how will we perceive the value of being done? And that goes to that other story, um, that if people have written, if people think something has been done by an AI at the moment, so in this story saying that if you read a story, if they think it was written by AI, people instinctively don't like it. They will pick fault in it, etc., etc. Um, but if they think it's been written on AI, they will hate it, even if it has been written by a person anyway. and so we automatically put a different value scale on it because we think it's been done by a machine in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I can imagine. I'd imagine it's the same thing that you might experience with like a story. Here's the other story that we were gonna pull into this was, people don't like stories that seem like it was written by AI, even if it was written by humans. And so will we start to see that again with behavioral types of things where, as you were describing, you have a robot create a Michelin style meal that lacks the, for lack of a better term, soul of what a human can put into a meal, because that missing ingredient would be love and care that is just absent with a robot. And so, would we start to notice it with these behavioral models? And I also wonder if that would make us a little bit more in tune with social cues. I really wonder about that thing, because you can imagine that there's like, if you think about these behavioral LBMs, is that what they're called? Large behavioral
Yeah.
models.
Yeah.
If you think about these LBMs, they're probably taking the average or the anticipated movements of the average response, right? And so you're looking at very much like the status quo. And so you might be able to tell when somebody's more excited because of the way that they're moving their hands or the way that they're moving their body, or when they're actually, depressed in the sense of moving slowly or hanging their head. Are you going to start to pick up more on these because it's outside of the average um, that these machines would exhibit in these LBMs, these large behavioral models, that then makes us a little bit better on communicating with humans? Is this going to make us better communicating with humans in the long run? I don't know.
Or is it? Yes, I mean, well, it's there's almost there's two, I guess, two perspectives on that. One, yes, because it would allow us to, if the humanoid robot was taking on these behavioral cues, and you could then work with that, and therefore you don't automatically do some of that too, especially if it could understand your behavioral cues. um you would, there'd be more onus on you to do that. However, not everybody deals with behavioral cues in the same way. And we can talk about, people with neurodiverse individuals who deal with social cues in very different ways and exhibit social cues in different ways, and that is part of the rich tapestry of human life. That's what makes cultures work. That's what makes us as a species work, because we're not all exactly the same. So how are we going? How are we going to deal with that? Is there going to be a point where, if somebody is, maybe got autistic traits or ADHD traits, who maybe don't pick up on social cues or react to social cues in the same way, are they going to be unable to use these robots if the robots are reacting to social stimuli, and exhibiting behavioral cues? Um, Likewise, if the robot is expecting to see behavioral cues from somebody who just doesn't exhibit them,
Hmm.
um, that's going to be a really interesting user interface to try and work with, to make them, try to basically understand the breadth of inputs that you could have.
Yeah, especially when it comes to trust, because if a robot misreads what the human is doing, then that's gonna it'll misread the input, and some of that safety risk mitigation, some of those factors will play in there too. If it misreads your intent and moves out of the way when in fact it's moving into your way, it's doing the whole dance thing of like, I'm moving this way, and then it moves to correct, and then how will those types of interactions happen? I do want to make sure that we have some time to talk about this other story here. So while this is super fascinating, maybe we could talk a little bit more about the post show. Any other closing thoughts on the race to become the latest and greatest humanoid robot?
I look I look forward to seeing it. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that, particularly that battle goes. But just to come, back to the last point, we talked about behavioral interaction. One big difference between UK and US is the UK. In the UK, we do sarcasm. a lot. Um, and Americans, you guys don't do sarcasm anywhere near as much as we do. So how would a robot get that? Um, yeah, good luck. What about you, Nick?
Start.
Are you happy with it with your robot that you got an order coming fairly soon?
Oh, yeah, I'm putting down as soon as I can. I'll order one of these the day it comes available. And yeah, we need a sarcasm mode because it would be. I want nothing better to have a sarcastic robot in my life that I could. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, what's the next story here, Barry?
So NASA's been laying out contracts to design their next spacesuit, particularly for the first moon landing. And in this case, the subtitle reads, "The astronauts will literally wear Prada." So NASA contractor Axiom Space has been put on contract to design the next spacesuit that's going to be used for the moon landings for the Artemis 3 missions. Um, and this will be the first moon landing since Apollo 17 in 1972. So it's been a while since they've done this. So you want to look cool when you're going to go and do this. So they've got the Italian luxury brand Prada along for the journey to help develop this spacesuit. So if you want to see what it looks like, it's out there on futurism.com, which is where we're getting the story from tonight. So you can see that it looks, I mean, in some ways, it doesn't necessarily look dissimilar to what they've had in the past. You recognize it as a more of a NASA spacesuit than, say, a SpaceX spacesuit, but it's meant for different things. I think the interesting bit here is the whilst it looks similar, the leaps in technology is supposed to be quite well. They call it groundbreaking in the way that it's being developed. I mean, fundamentally, this is going to allow astronauts to go on spacewalks for 8 hours a day and be protected in what they're doing. It can do carbon dioxide scrubbing as it goes, so that's meant to be a brand new thing. Um, and they're also doing this alongside the new vehicles that they're getting, they're developing for this. So yeah, we'll see what it looks like, and I think it looks quite exciting. It looks quite cool. And as you said, we've got friends of the podcast who actually had their hands on developing this stuff. So we've got skin in the game.
Yeah, we do. I mentioned this at the top, but we actually have a close connection to this. So, Katie, if you're familiar with Katie, she has been working in the lab with us since, oh geez, 2000. So no 2020. Wow, 2000 would be a long time. 2020. And so she's been with us for a while, and she actually had personal involvement on this. I think she was in an internship working on this very project. So we have a very close relationship to this project. So there's some really cool things here. You know, you mentioned it looks cool, but really what we're looking at here is even deeper than that because you look cool, but then also I think there's some increased mobility here that they're talking about in terms of being able to move around more freely. And so, you know, you have the human factors considerations built into the spacesuit beyond just looking cool. The whole thing is, you know, kind of focused around Prada. Sure, fine, but I mean, you know, like really, we're looking at you know, being able to operate in the environment longer. We're looking at the mobility piece of it. There's a ton of safety considerations that went into this suit in terms of um, making sure that that there's safety during these lunar missions. I think there's you know there's a footnote here about using specialized tools, and so that kind of gets at the mobility again, not just you know range of motion, but also within you know with being able to do fine motor movements of the hands and being able to use those tools. And if you think about some of these uh, evolutions here within the spacesuit. I think it's one thing to be functional, but then like there's this whole other psychological component of being an astronaut that I think I don't know, when I think astronaut, I think cool. And so you want to have that, like, you want to have the suit match the cool aspect of being an astronaut. And so now you can be out in space and look cool doing it. So I think, I just think it's so cool.
It's interesting. One of the comments that I saw, and the reason I mentioned the SpaceX stuff, because obviously they developed their suit as well, and they said, "Oh, the SpaceX suit looks a lot easier to use. It looks like it's a lot more suited to the body, but they were developed for very different things."
Hmm.
And that's what I think a lot of people don't really understand is the SpaceX suit that they've got at the moment is made to sit to allow people just to use Dragon, and use that platform. Whereas this is going to be for moonwalking. This is going to be going out for to go
Right.
and actually do work in harsh terrains, conduct scientific experiments, and whatever else they do out there. I mean, for me, when I see things like this, I immediately look at two things. That's the hands, and then the articulation at the joints. And you compare this to what we go back to the early moon missions, and the suits that they were wearing there, super clunky, really, really
Hmm.
hard thing. And you've got them iconic images of them sort of bouncing on the lunar surface. Whereas you can look at this and see that they've really thought about the articulation in the knees. There's folds in the material to allow the suit to give as you bend your knees, as you bend your elbows. But also there's still lots of protection there. You can tell that this is that on the arms it's quite bulky.
Hmm.
So there's clearly lots of fibers in there to provide insulation, to provide protection. But what they've done this time, it's just going from the graphics, from the pictures, that the actual wrist, the gloves themselves go into, they don't directly attach; they go inside the sleeve. So you've actually got greater range of motion there to work with. So actually focusing on allowing the operator, the astronaut, to do the job that it is that they want to do, and presumably allow a wide range of roles to be undertaken here as well. So yeah, I think it looks cool, but it also looks functional. So I can't wait to see this thing actually being tested or further tested next year, and see where it gets to.
Yeah, here's a cool point that I had missed, excuse me, on my initial read through. But they're designing this to be to fit astronauts from the first to the 99th percentile, which is sort of making sure that it can fit everybody, right? So it's this inclusive design, which again, kind of talking about at the top of the show, really I think is awesome because it's now saying instead of just a certain body type, anyone can be an astronaut, which is just cool. Regardless of gender, uh, or whatever you look like. I think this is super rad that they're designing for this wide of a percentile. Um,
Do you think
so
that's do you think that's actually possible? Because I mean,
mm,
and are they talking about first to 95th percentile? Sorry, was it first to 95th or first to 99?
99th.
So is that of the general population or of their as in their
Ooh, that's a
candidate
good
population?
question. I don't know.
Because if it's of the general population, that's a shout. That's a one heck of a requirement. And if I was the requirements manager for that, I'd be really, are we going to do that? But again, with the way
Really? You sorry, your requirements manager cosplay was perfect in that moment.
um, so, but when you look at it, you can see how some of these bits may be modular. So the torso section looks like it's got a almost an upper jacket and a lower. Um, could it be sort of almost like a dungaree type thing under there? And so does that allow for greater variation in torso length? And the same could be said for potentially the arms and the legs as well. So maybe there is some interesting design elements in there that if only we had an expert
If
that
only.
knew something about it who could answer some of these questions, that would be fantastic. Um, but it'd be interesting to know how they what design decisions they've made in order to meet such a quite frankly outrageous requirement. um, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm quite a fan of that type of thing as a challenge because you're absolutely right. If we can design for the broad audience, we absolutely should. Um, I just don't know how well that's going to work for a particular mission. Yeah, no,
Yeah, I
I
do not
yeah,
know. That was on the HFES post regarding it, so I'm looking at the, source article now, and I'm not seeing anything about percentiles. So, I'm not sure where that information is sourced from. Hopefully, that is, true, but maybe we can get some clarification on that.
So is this so look at the suit as well. Is this now that blend of HF and UX? So one of the things that I've always said is around the, the UX brings the style, it brings the beauty to a product rather than HF could be seen as a bit more functional. So is this bringing Prada in to help looking at the style of this in a similar to way, we keep referencing the SpaceX stuff, but they're the people who produced other spacesuits recently. Um, Everybody sort of commented on how cool the SpaceX stuff looked as well. Is bringing the style now into this important? Because NASA has historically been known for maybe substance over style. Does this leap to style? Is it important?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure they're sticking to some of the standards that, uh, they need to.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know of any aesthetic standards that might influence this, other than make it look cool.
Make it look
Uh,
sexy.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting though because you could I can very much see a sort of a requirement for, making it look and feel awesome such
Mhm.
that it's part of this propaganda machine of like we need more people to grow up to want to be astronauts to drive that exploration space.
Yeah.
And so it's all marketing and advertising and propaganda from that perspective. And so I don't know. I just don't know.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I would almost love to be a fly on the wall when the design sprint was going on, and you've got um NASA human factors representatives in there with they'll have the standards that they've developed and their best practice and all that sort of stuff, and then they'll have a designer from Prada in the same room going, "What about making it red? What about having this stylistic look to make it
Mhm,
look cool on?" Because you're absolutely right. One of the and we need people to find this impressive. We need people to find to want to do this, and that was kind of exemplified on the Apollo 13 when you watch that. And they before the incident happens, they highlight that they're doing some of the live streaming from the spacecraft itself. But when you see it down on in mission control, it's not being streamed because none of the networks wanted it. Space wasn't sexy anymore.
mhm.
Um, and so when this goes up, it's not only got to function well, but it's got to look good doing it. So I'd have loved to be in the fly on the wall with that, with the two different worlds coming together, and to see almost understand the influences that the Prada designers had into this and what they can lay claim to.
Yeah. And while we're doing social posts here, I'll just read Katie's post about working on this. Hey, I got to work on this over the summer. So exciting to see it getting over the finish line. Rocket ship, astronaut emoji. All right. I think we gotta end the stories there for tonight. So thank you to our friends over at IEEE Spectrum, The Byte, Science Daily for all of our news stories this week. If you want to follow along, we post the links to all the original articles under weekly roundups on our blog. Also join us on our Discord for more discussion on these stories and more. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to see what's going on in the human factors community right after this. Are you tired of boring lectures and textbooks on human factors and UX? Well, grab your headphones and get ready for a wild ride with the Human Factors Minute podcast. Each minute is like a mini crash course packed with valuable insights and information on various organizations, conferences, usability methods, theories, models, certifications, tools, and much more. We'll take you on a journey through the fascinating world of human factors, from the ancient history to the latest trends and developments. Listen in as we explore the field and discover new ways to enhance the user experience. From the think aloud protocol to the critical incident technique, focus groups, iterative design, we'll make sure that you're the smartest person in the room. Tune in on the 10th, the 20th, and the last day of every month for a new and interesting tidbit related to human factors. Don't miss out on the Human Factors Minute podcast, your ultimate source for all things human factors.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our monthly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and access to the full library of Human Factors Minute, a weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
Yes, that's right. Huge thank you, as always, to our patrons. You truly do keep the lights on over here and help support all of our endeavors. I don't know if you know this, but the patrons really help support a lot of things outside of just the weekly shows, but it also helps attendance at things like HFES and some of our ancillary coverage that we put out there into the ether. So thank you all for that coverage, or for that support. Truly helps us over here. All right. With that, let's get into this next part of the show we simply call
It came from. It came from.
I got to do something with that clip. All right. It came from. This is the part of the show where we search all over the internet to bring you something that the human factors community is talking about. So we have one up this week from LinkedIn, and this is a particularly interesting piece. And this was posted, not ironically, but this was posted into the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors. You might be familiar with it. This post is by Gary Guan? And writing why human factors and ADHD can be a good mix. You can tell we pulled this in October because it says October is Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder Awareness Month. So we're sharing the story of human factors specialist and CIEHF chartered member Charlie Turner on his journey to ADHD diagnosis and what it meant for him. ADHD is a condition that affects people's behavior. They can seem restless, may have trouble concentrating, and may act on impulse. But there are benefits too, such as having great attention to detail, having endless ideas, and being creative, all of which can help a career in human factors. Charlie says those of us with ADHD only find it hard to focus on things that we don't find exciting or interesting. If it's something we enjoy doing, we're all able to hyper-focus to an extraordinary degree. And then there's a link to the full story from Charlie there. And you, Barry, had also posted a sort of supplementary post in relation to that. Do you want to go over that one?
Yeah, so this was highlighted by a friend and colleague of mine, Kelly Davis, and she'd put a post out there saying, as somebody who's diagnosed as autistic at 46, the post completely resonates. People keep commenting about the increase of people suddenly having ADHD and ASD, and suggesting it's a social trend that somehow these conditions are cool or even temporary. Worst of all, is people keep saying everyone's a bit autistic. I'm sorry, but they're not. We're human. We still act like humans. We still have traits that are supercharged and have impact on our lives, sometimes resulting in shocking statistics like the ones that are in the article below. More awareness and understanding is absolutely needed. And the preconceptions of ADHD and the naughty boy problem, well, or the result of bad parenting need to be broken. And then this led on to another comment by Amanda, my wife, around highlighting the differences in the way that the male and female ADHD is perceived and understood. So there's a lot of that the misdiagnosis or undiagnosis of ADHD is much further, much higher in women than it is in men at the moment. So, and that way, when you look at the the whole ADHD thing is way underdiagnosed anyway. To have that imbalance, as always seems to be the case between male and female as well, is still a huge thing. But I would just highlight that the original story, the Charlie Turner story, is in the Ergonomist magazine in the June edition, and so it came out in 2023, and so that is linked in that original story for the full process that Charlie went through to really getting to that idea about why he thought he should be diagnosed in the first place. And the interesting bit is that he did a one of these things that you do online that sort of filter questions effectively, and was like, oh, maybe there is something there. Yeah, and interesting.
Yeah. I just want to echo the sentiment of like ADHD in human factor. I think it is really just a great mix. Not self-diagnosed. I I had a similar experience to Charlie where I had answered some of those questions like maybe you should or I'd read some accounts
Mm.
from folks of like, I have ADHD and this is something that happened to me, and those types of accounts had encouraged me to go get my own diagnosis. And I think it's really interesting from the perspective of the overlap between ADHD and human factors, and really they are complementary.
Mhm.
Uh, I used to work in a building where I could work on a different thing every week. And especially in the podcast realm, we talk about different stories every week. So go and talk about, hey, it interests me this week. Let's talk about it then. And it's very much that self-serving, uh, that self-serving rotation of new things that keep the dopamine hit coming, which is why
Mhm.
it's been sustainable for so long. But I think, beyond that, it also the superpower aspect of it really helps me do work as well. Sometimes I'll lock myself alone at night to focus on a task when I don't have the distractions. And when I get into that superpower mode, I can do a lot of really great things in a focused amount of time. Um, and it's just, it just feels like there's always something coming from, oh, new information. Okay, rope that into how we do things, or a new project. Even if it's within the project that you're working on, there's a new thing to work on that thing. And so it's just a conveyor belt of never ending things to learn.
Absolutely. And I think what I quite like is the more that we talk about it, the more people will start at least reflecting, oh, maybe this is a bit of me, or maybe we should have the discussion, or this I should have the discussion with a loved one, or something like that. Because certainly working with our children, and understanding what their traits are, and then the fact that it's genetic, means that we've had conversations with ourselves, and then we've had conversation with our parents around,
Hmm.
um, you know have you maybe thought about the fact that it isn't new? It's just the fact well, it's just been around for a long time, and I think what I find it's quite sad in a way, and that I recognize why the older generations are going, well, I had to put up with it, deal with it, crack on, because it's one of these things that, yes, they been undiagnosed for a long time, and it's not it didn't exist, it just we didn't know about it, we didn't know it was a thing, and now we understand about it, we can
Right.
leverage that better. But I also get the fact that they didn't have that opportunity. They didn't have that. So I think that their attitude of, look, we had to deal with it, so should you. I don't agree with it, but I definitely get it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And if you're curious about what some of those things were, feel free to reach out to me on Discord. I'm happy to walk through some of those things. I'm quite open about the process of how I found out. So if you're curious, let me know. Let's get into this. Any other final words on that, Barry?
No, that's good. I think, but just keep talking, be kind.
Keep talking, be kind. All right, let's just get into one more thing. There's no intro for this one. It's just where we talk about one more thing. Barry, what's your one more thing this week?
Well, I've been out for a while, so I'm going to go for two things. Firstly, is more of a formal announcement that I'm now on the IEA Communications and Public Relations Committee, which is not an easy thing to say. Very quickly, specifically, I'm responsible for refreshing and delivering the social media output. So if you want something shared by the IEA on LinkedIn specifically, I'm kind of focusing on that at the moment as a growth area. Tag me in it, or tag in the IEA new LinkedIn page, and I will make sure that we share what you're doing. But the thing that I've had to learn over the past couple of weeks, I wouldn't necessarily go to the reasons why, but I've never been able to take pills. Never been able. So I always have to have the soluble paracetamol. I always have to have either dissolvable ibuprofen or crunch them with my teeth to swallow them
Ugh.
down. It's got used to that. But because of some pills I'm not having to take, I have to take them whole, and I'm having to learn how to take pills. My children think it's hilarious, but I've just had, and you talk to the doctor and say, right, I can't take pills. They're like, oh, is it just psycho? Have you tried all the tricks? Yes, I've tried all the tricks on the internet. I know it's psychological. It's part of my job. I get why it is. It still doesn't mean that I can swallow these tablets. So I've had to put on my big boy pants and learn how to take pills. I still have to give myself a pat on the back every single day that I take these couple of pills that I need to take. One of them's quite small, that's fine. One of them is bigger, and I still get a rush of adrenaline every time I have to take this tablet.
what
Um,
what what's the biggest pill you got? I'm trying to find my biggest pill right now. I think I have.
I know you by most people's standards, these pills are small, but I have a flashback of when I choked on a pill years and years and years ago. Um,
Oh yeah.
and so I have to physically do this whole thing. Yes, no,
All
that's
right,
not
there
happening.
you go. That's my pill. That's the size of my pill right there.
Yeah, no, I'm not taking that. That's just not
Mouth
happening.
for reference.
The fact that my kids can like sort of dry swallow pills, and you just like go, just no, I have to have like a gallon of water per pill. Anyway, maybe in a few years I might be a bit more going to be able to take these things, but yeah.
You'll
Anyway,
get there. You'll get there. Hey, I'm
okay.
proud of you. I'm proud of you. Take it.
Thank you.
It can sometimes be a hard pill to swallow when you don't know how to do something and or can't do something, and you're just doing great. Wow, this is a whole inch. This is a whole inch big. I'm just now comparing this to.
Yeah,
There you
see,
go.
I would refuse to take that. I would just have to refuse. I couldn't do it. Anyway,
Ah,
enough mocking me and my inability to take pills. Nick, what's your one more thing?
well, I have something really, really weird that I'd like to talk about, and the thing that's weird about it is that I have newly discovered a new team dynamic. And so I had this weird experience where I went to a conference in what was it, early September. You may have heard of it. It's HFES Aspire. And when I returned, my son had suddenly became much better at a game that we enjoy playing together. And so then he started exploring with playing online. And you get the sweaties online. You get people who are really good at the game online. And just for reference, this is Rocket League, right? So nothing super like you can get really sweaty in Rocket League, but it's cars pushing around a ball to play soccer. Okay.
Mhm.
Um and so he's gotten to the point now where he can play online against other people, and we win almost every time we play together. And this whole team dynamic is just so interesting to me because I'm explaining strategy to a 5-year-old, uh,
Mhm.
where I'm saying, "Okay, so here's how we tackle it. You stay in the zone in front of me, so that way you can try to block it before it gets to me, and then if you miss it, I have a chance to hit it, and then if you hit it, then great, then you get the points." And so trying to explain to him how all this logic happens is really interesting. And then we get into this zone where we're just performing well, and to the point where we won a tournament together, which is just
Cool.
it's fascinating.
Mhm.
And so team dynamics with a 5-year-old is just something that's completely different and fascinating. And now he doesn't want to play games at all, and he wants to do regular 5-year-old things. So it's just he he probably has ADHD too, and he's just dropping one thing and moving to the next. But that's what I had for my one more thing. All right, and with that, I think that's it for today, everyone. If you like this episode and enjoy some of the discussion around Tesla bots, I'll encourage you to go listen to one of our previous episodes. I know we had a whole episode on Tesla bots that you can go check out. Comment wherever you're listening with what you think of the story this week, or tag Barry in it so he can retweet it, repost it from the IEA LinkedIn account. For more in-depth discussion, you can always join us on our Discord community. Visit our official website, sign up for our newsletter, stay up to date with all the latest Human Factors news. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, there's a few things you can do. One, wherever you're at right now, like the video, leave us a 5-star review, all that stuff. That helps. Two, more importantly, you can tell your friends about us. That really helps the show grow because your word is better than some strangers on the internet. And three, if you have the financial means to, you want to help support the show, help us get better things to do better conference coverage, etc., consider supporting us on Patreon. We truly, truly appreciate those who support the show there. As always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. Mr. Barry Kirby, thank you for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about how to swallow pills?
I'm a terrible person to talk to about that, but you can come and mock me on social media, and you can find me on Facebook and on LinkedIn and various places like that. But if you want to listen a bit more about me chatting to other people in the Human Factors community and seeing what they're up to, then come and find me at 1202 The Human Factors Podcast at 1202podcast.com.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Rome. You can find me on our Discord and across social media at Nick_Rome. Stay tuned for the post show, and thanks again for tuning in to Human Factors Cast. Until next time, it depends.